is just that it's so interesting.
And really appreciate what's around you.
Being able to have second chances.
Hi, my name is Steve Jacobs, and I am a lifestyle videographer and photographer.
Hi, my name is Tanya Cortez. I'm a college student. My major is art education.
Hello, my name is Estefania Nevares, and I work as a production manager in food manufacturing.
My earliest memory as a child, I was like 2 or 3 years old, and I remember it was Christmas time. My dad had bought me this, looked like a little pillow or an animal with wheels, and I remember like using my feet to kind of propel myself in the back area.
Being around 5 or 6 and playing outside with my neighbors and my brothers and sisters.
Playing with my little cousins as growing up, especially during Christmas.
One of my favorite childhood memories is waiting for my dad to get home from work and running out to greet him, grabbing his lunch pail. We always took like who was the first one to get out there first, so it was always fun.
My dad bought my brother and I bikes for Christmas one year, and that was really fun because, you know, once you have a bike, the sort of circle of where you can go outside of your neighborhood just expands exponentially. And so we basically grew up, you know, riding these little BMX bikes, and we met other friends that also had bikes. And so I think of all the Christmas gifts I ever got as a kid, I think getting a bicycle was definitely one of my favorites.
I'm a very clumsy person in general, and so there's like this hill that's like next to us, and I would usually get hurt a lot in that hill, but I do remember where it's like I would go on my bike and go down the hill, and so like that speed of the bike is going really fast. So when I was doing it, there was that rock where you kind of like stumble and you're like, move. It happened, and when I did that, I scratched my knee, and it was full on bleeding, and like I was bleeding from like to the point where my sock was even wet from blood. But that is definitely, like, I would say just getting hurt.
I think through most of my childhood, it said I either want to be a police officer, fireman, or a race car driver. And as it turns out, none of those happened, and I ended up being a mechanic in the military because I scored well on the test. But I disliked that job because it wasn't creative. And so 3 years into my military service, I actually retrained into a career field called broadcast journalism. And so I went from, might be a police officer to being a photographer and videographer.
I'm a veterinarian. Growing up, we would have dogs, and sometimes we would have the, stray dogs as well. And so I feel like that kind of stuck around for me, like as I grew up. But then I was like, when I started college, I was like, that's not it. That's definitely not what I want to do. So I ended up so right now I'm just doing art education for my major, and I'm hoping to become an art teacher. Right now I'm just working at a museum at my school, but that's all I'm hoping to work for, is to become an art teacher in the future.
My childhood dream job was to be a teacher. As I got older was politics, and now I work as a production manager with a food manufacturing facility.
I would say by far the happiest memory I have is when I was at that mid-career point in the military, and I was leaving my job as being a mechanic, and I was getting retrained to be a broadcast journalist. I was at a school, an Army base called Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis. And it turns out one of my classmates was a woman who is now my wife. So we dated while we were both changing career fields and going into something completely different. And it was beautiful and sort of sad at the same time, because she was going to Portugal after the training and I was going to Turkey. And so even though we dated for a couple of months during that year in 1987, we actually spent the next 2 years physically apart because we were stationed at different bases. But she was so different than every other person I'd ever dated that I just sort of knew, like deep down, that somehow she would become my wife, and she did. So definitely happiest moment of my life.
Being able to attain a promotion within my milestone gap. So I became a production manager before 30, and that was a good achievement that I had.
We got to see, like, you know, sea creatures for me, most of us actually, for the first time. You know, you would see it in TVs and books, and it's like when it's like in person and it's up close, it's like, oh my God, this is so cool, this is so awesome. So that definitely has stuck around.
One of the saddest moments I've had was realizing death is real and it's around us. So seeing family members and close friends pass away in the last couple of years has really put life into perspective.
My mom and I recently had this conversation not that long ago where it was like we were talking about my cousin's death. I feel like that kind of like we always talk about him a lot in our family, but when we were talking about it, she said how we went to the funeral and as a little girl, and for some reason that memory kind of like came up when we were talking, and so I do remember when we were at the funeral, I do remember his hands, because his hands were kind of burnt because he had a car accident. And so when we were talking about that, like that memory just like popped up, and I was like, wow, that was really sad, because all I remember was just like his hand, and you know, I think that's all I remember really. I don't really remember his face, but I do remember his hand for some reason, and I think that kind of like stuck. But I would say that was probably like a sad memory. But yeah.
A friend that I'd known for more than 30 years, his name was Lane Arnoff, and he was a video nerd like me. And so we would geek out to, you know, looking at different new video cameras and stuff like that. And he lived here in Riverside, and he worked with my wife at the broadcast center out at March Air Reserve Base. And because she worked holidays, a lot of times I spent the holidays with him. So I'd be over to his house for Christmas or Thanksgiving. And eventually he moved back to where he grew up in Northern California, but we spoke by phone like every couple of weeks. And even though we were super close, he had this sort of pain and sadness. And in 2019, I found out that he took his own life. And in 2020, my dad ended up doing the same exact thing. And 6 months after he did, his brother, my uncle, also took his own life. So I had 3 years in a row of dealing with suicides with people that I dearly loved. And it was tragic and sad.
One of the scariest moments I've experienced was I was on the road driving a truck with a hitch on, and unfortunately I hit black ice and it spun, so that not knowing if I was gonna land, it was dark, I didn't know where I was at, and then getting stuck in the middle of nowhere for almost 9 hours to try to get some help.
It's tradition on the island of Terceira where after a bull would fight in the bull ring, the bull would never go back to the ring to fight, but they would let the bull run loose in certain villages to celebrate this holiday. And so the bull would be on this 100-foot long rope. And even though the horns of the bull would be capped with these brass caps, they're still quite dangerous. And so the military would always advise people, the Americans, to not go to these festivals, or if you did, to be up high on a wall where the bull, you know, couldn't get to you. And so I was perfecting my photography skills at that time, and I decided I was going to go to one of these festivals. And so I always kept my distance from the bull because obviously I didn't want to die. But on this one particular occasion, I had my telephoto lens and I was focused on this bull that was like 2 blocks away. And then all of a sudden I see like 50 Portuguese men running straight toward me. So I knew that the bull was chasing them. So instead of following them and being in the front of the pack, I decided I was going to turn right at this corner and try to hide. And so there was this garage door that was open, and the garage doors in Portugal are sort of split in half. And so the bottom half was about 4 feet tall, but the top part was open. So I jumped over this 4-foot thing, and now I'm in a garage with my camera, and I thought the bull was going to go straight past chasing these guys, and it didn't. It turned the corner and stopped like 10 feet in front of me. And it was just me staring at this bull. And I was so terrified that I couldn't even, click the shutter because I was afraid that any movement or sound would cause this bull to jump into the garage, and then that would have been it for me. And so I'm sure I was shaking. I don't remember, but fortunately for me, this young Portuguese kid with an umbrella got onto the side of the bull and twirled the umbrella, and it caught the bull's attention. Then the bull started chasing him. And I was just like, put my camera back in my backpack, and I drove home. And I walked in the house, and my wife was like, how was it? And I was like, I almost died today.
We lived next to a mortuary, and at that time, the mortuary was having a funeral going on. And for some reason, which is like, out of all the days, they had it open, like the doors open, where like it was just the entrance door, which is usually rare, but I think it was because people were still going in, even though like the funeral was going on. But as we were passing by, I felt this like sudden weight on my shoulder, and it was just like, oh my god, it felt so bad. Like I still remember that feeling because I've never felt that before. It just felt like someone was pushing their weight on my shoulders.
One of the life lessons I've learned is being able to have second chances. So if something happens, not giving up and being able to pick yourself up and redeem yourself.
Listening to the advice of my parents, even though like sometimes I don't, because it's like, oh, I don't really want to listen to them, because there's that like trait where it's like you don't want to listen to your parents, but then they have a point, and in the end you're like, oh, she had a point, he had a point, I should have listened.
Well, I'm 59 years old, and I think the lesson that I think I've learned through my lifetime is to just take life as it comes. Don't sweat the small stuff. Try to be happy, especially if you're picking a career, because happiness is way more important than money. And also just realize that there are things that are going to happen to you in life that you can't sometimes explain, and you just have to sort of take it in and say, okay, well, life is interesting. And as a friend of mine once told me, he said, life is delicious. And I've often pondered about that phrase over the years, because the older I get, the more I realize he was right. I mean, you're maybe not going to like every meal you have in life, sad times, but overall, if you look at life through a lens of happiness and gratitude, life really is delicious.
Have I found my purpose in life yet? No, not yet. I mean, the thing about life is that like you're still trying to learn things, trying to also unlearn things as well, but I don't think I have yet.
I think I have found my purpose in life, both professionally and personally. I think that it took a lot to get there, but it's definitely something that I've now put into perspective.
I think I have found my purpose in life. And maybe, I think my grandmother, was instrumental in kind of shaping me. We spent a lot of time with them as kids growing up. And I think what I've learned as far as your purpose in life, you can have a great job and that can bring you joy and purpose. And fortunately, I did have that for most of my career. But what I've found is more important than all of that: job, money, wealth, whatever. The most important thing in life that will really speak to your purpose is having someone to love and being loved in return. I would like to say that I think humans are intelligent enough to realize that fighting, killing people over thousands of years that we've been on the planet, it doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't change anything. Yeah, you might gain more land, but it doesn't really help society. And, it's sad, but the Middle East, and Palestine and Israel, they were fighting when I was a kid growing up. They're still fighting. I think it would be great if we could finally figure it out that war and killing is not the answer. But if I'm a betting man, humans don't change, and I think we'll probably still be having this conversation thousands of years from now.
It's a tough thing, to be honest. I feel like a lot of people just make it hard for others to achieve that world peace that we want.
I don't see it possible. I don't see us actually attaining that.
I believe there is something, but I guess I'm sort of like a doubting Thomas, and I think to myself, if there was a God that was all knowing and all powerful, why would he let so many millions of people be killed, throughout history? And so I would say maybe I'm more spiritual than religious.
I do believe that there is some sense of higher power, but I wouldn't say it would be one, like, higher power. I want to say there would be multiple, because you got to think, the way I think about it, it's like you got to think about like the other cultural faiths and their beliefs and that, they have multiple gods. And so when it just comes to one God that has this whole control of like everything, that's where I feel like it just feels wrong for me in a sense.
I do believe in God. I think the way that I believe in God today is different than when I was younger and through my younger adult years. But I do believe in Him. I do believe that, there's a heaven and earth. So I know He's there and He's watching us.
I'm still young. I'm still in my 20s, bro. Like, I still want more time in my life. If I were to have more time in my life, then yes, for sure.
I believe if I were to die today, I would be happy. I think I've done a lot of things to achieve goals that I've had that ultimately will allow me to be happy if I were to die today.
I've been very fortunate throughout my lifetime to have jobs that I've loved. I've had amazing supervisors when I was still working. I met an incredible woman that I've been married to for 33 wonderful years. And she and I have had this conversation before, that both of us have reached a point where if we died today, we would have no regrets and we would leave this planet happy.
I believe in heaven and hell, and you being judged upon your actions and then getting sent to one. But that's pretty much it. Afterlife, nothing of reincarnation or anything like that.
I do believe in the afterlife. I read a compelling book about a year ago called The True Story of a Past Life Skeptic. And it was about a guy who gets hypnotized and he reveals 26 facts about a life that he led as a painter. And he spent the next 5 years of his life investigating it to see if he could prove or disprove it. And he ended up proving all 26 facts. When you think about that, how would this guy know anything about a past life that he had lived? And yet he was able to prove that this painter guy really existed in the 1800s, and it was actually him. And so I do believe that you come back. I don't know the why. My grandmother used to say, you keep coming back until you reach a state of consciousness where you're a decent, human being. I mean, that was her theory.
Celebrating Day of the Dead, as even, that whole history with it, but also, having that sense of comfort that they're coming back, but also there is an afterlife, and they will come back on that certain day. But I definitely do think that there is some type of afterlife, but there isn't can't say for sure or not, because there's not really much of an evidence per se of that, in my opinion. But there's probably something there, but we just have no clue what it is.
So I've always been a person that says no to love, but most recently I have allowed myself to actually fall in love. He has been around for about a year, and I think I have found love.
I have never been in a relationship, but I definitely experienced liking someone. That saying where it's wrong time or wrong place, but right person. That definitely has happened to me, where it's I definitely liked that person, but I wasn't accepting myself at that time. So it was, and at that point, there was a time where, because we talked about it too, that they liked me at one point too, but I wasn't accepting who I was as like sexuality wise, because like I was still like, do I like this gender or that gender, or do I like both? So it was just hard for me to understand and like really accept who I was. But I've definitely have experienced love.
I was 18 years old. I was in the military. I was stationed in England, and I met a beautiful young woman named Sandy Stone. She was from Connecticut, and we dated for about a year and a half. And she was just such a gentle, loving person. But the problem is I knew from a young age that I didn't want to have children, and she wanted children. And although it was painful for me to do, I told her I had to break up with her because I knew she wanted children and I didn't want children. And so, but you know, for a year and a half, it was beautiful. She was a beautiful person. I often think about her. I've never heard from her since that. That was in the early 80s. I'm hoping she was married and had lots of kids as she wanted. So that was the first love. And then the second one is my wife Jordana, who I'm married to now. She's just such an interesting and thoughtful and funny person that I loved her like almost immediately after meeting her.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I don't think we would go to another planet. I know it's always been thrown out there, but I don't see myself wanting to go to another planet and start life all over. If that was an option, I would just stay here.
I mean, the idea of going to another planet doesn't really interest me. And, you know, I was kind of a science nerd as a kid. And if I think about what's the most likely place we can go, it's to either a planet that's closer to the sun or further away from Earth. One's going to be too hot, one's going to be too cold. There's no proof of life on these planets as we know it. So I wouldn't be that interested in going to another planet.
At that point, I'd be like, okay, I would just accept my death, because it's like, okay, do I have to go to that planet because of that of the whole climate change situation that's going on right now in this planet? And would I save myself from that? I would say no, because it's like, I'm already here. I might as well just stick around and, you know, live here as I can. But yeah, I wouldn't want to live at that planet.
My goal in life was to be happy. That's all I wanted. I didn't care if I was rich. I mean, obviously I didn't want to be poor, but I'd rather be poor and happy than rich and miserable. And so throughout my career, I kind of took that path. And it's funny, I mean, I remember one time I was working for the city of Riverside, and I could have been their marketing director years ago, but it was stressful. And you know, you have to manage people, and that's stressful. That's almost like having children. And so I remember they hired this marketing lady, and she obviously was above me, so she was my supervisor. And one day she pulled me aside and she said, "I don't understand your career path." And I'm like, "What don't you understand?" And she's like, "You could be in my position making double what you're making now, but you chose not to." And I said, "That's right." And she's like, "I don't get it." And I said, "Because I want to be happy. I want to get up every day and love going to work and not be stressed out by deadlines and having to supervise people and counsel them." And I said, I did it for a period of time and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And I said, in 2008, I made up my mind that I would never take another job that didn't make me happy. And that's exactly what I did for the next 9 years until I retired. I was in a great job, super creative. I didn't have to supervise people. And even though I wasn't making $100,000 plus a year, it didn't matter to me, because happiness is always going to be more important to me anyway than money.
Have an exhibition as an artist. I mean, I feel like at one point when you're making art and, you know, you're putting it away, it's like, I kind of want to show it to an audience, you know, have that experience as well, because my professors would be like, you know, participate in this, you know, go to galleries, go to like museums, look at all those artworks. And it's like, at one point I do want to have like a solo exhibition, or even have my work in a museum.
I try to do my ambitions in short-term goals so that they're attainable. So my next ambitious goal is to become a plant manager by the age of 35. From there, it would just be every 5 years, moving up the corporate ladder to VP, to senior VP, and then possibly one day a CEO.
I won the lottery. You know, I don't think much would change. You know what I mean? I live a comfortable life. I have a house. I've got a car. I don't need to have, you know, Mercedes. I don't need expensive equipment. That kind of stuff doesn't bring me joy. I think if I won the lottery, I would probably find a way to give that money away anonymously to organizations that I feel strongly about. I wouldn't give it to any like one agency or person. You know, I think lottery to me, it's a lot of money that you would never probably be able to spend in your lifetime. And I think if you could take, say you won $10 million, if you could take $10 million and change the lives of thousands of people, to me, that's way more useful. And I think it's a better use of money is to try to help as many people as you can, because I already have what I need. I have my money, I have my wife, I have camera equipment, I have everything that I need. I don't need $10 million. And so if I won the lottery, I would give that away to causes that my wife and I both feel strongly about.
Probably give some to my parents, you know, for them, but also save some as well for my education, because, you know, that debt is gonna go. At one point, I am probably gonna be in debt. Who knows, but that money would definitely help. So either for school, probably to continue my education, but also if probably buy a house, because I mean, my whole family, we've been living here since I've been born. And so buying a house would probably be like, that's our home, you know? Like, it's ours. It's not like an apartment where it's like, it's not yours. Like, you can't be comfortable, 100% comfortable, because you know it's not yours. But a house definitely would be something that I would want with buying that, using that with that money from the lottery.
If I were to win the lottery, I think first off, I would pay my parents' home, make sure that they're good and they have what they need in their home. I'll buy a house for myself, and then the rest of it would be going into different investments.
My favorite color, and it has been since I was a little kid, has always been green. And I think it's because I feel a strong connection to nature. I've always felt like when you're out in nature and you take time to appreciate how vast and large it is and how much bigger it is than yourself, I think you can get a lot of peace, you know, from that.
It's just so soothing to me. Like, it's so calming. It just reminds me of it just reminds me of like the forest, just nature, like the whole landscape.
Green and being in nature, I find extremely powerful. And that's probably why it's been my favorite color for most of my life.
Favorite color would be orange. The reason I picked orange was because it was like an out there color. It wasn't something that your typical red, blue, green. That's why I picked it, and I like the different variations of shades it has. So that's why I like orange.
Have you ever thought that you would be in a documentary?
Frankly, no. I'm usually the one behind the camera, and so I feel kind of nervous, actually, to be honest with you. Now I kind of feel what people, when I interview people, what they're feeling. It's like a combination of the lights, and you want to make sure you're answering the questions properly. And I've watched a lot of documentaries. I mean, I love movies and films and docs, but I never thought I would actually be in one, so I feel grateful that you asked me to be part of it. And I've seen your work. You do amazing work, so I know it's going to be great. And so it'll be exciting just to see how it turns out.
Nope, I did not ever think I would be part of a documentary, but I'm here.
I'm very camera shy, but I was like, why don't I just risk it? Like, just do it for once. Just to have that sort of experience, like, oh, did you know I was in the documentary? Yeah, that'd be cool. So, no, I didn't really expect I would be in the documentary, but I feel like you kind of have to take chances of those, because at one point, when people ask, do you want to be in this, do you want to be in that, do you want to do that, or do you want to do this? And then at one point, they kind of stop asking you, and it kind of feels like, oh no, I lost that opportunity. And so I just kind of wanted to take a chance and do it. And I'm really glad that I did, because I'm having a blast.